Welcome to another weekend action of MLS where once again we're going to have a full slate of action where there's going to be 12 games that's going to be taking place. And this week we are going to see a couple of big rivalry including El Trafico and Cascadia derby that's going to be taking place on Sunday. And that this week in terms of MLS action, it's kind of a little bit of a reversal. So you know how usually in terms of the weekend action of MLS, Saturday is usually the day that has the most game compared to Sunday. Well, this week it's the opposite. It's Saturday, the one that has the fewest game, as there's only going to be 4 games that's going to be taking place on Saturday. And on Sunday, there's going to be 8 games that is going to be taking place. And it's going to be a little bit like what happened I had to deal with on Wednesday, where there's going to be a lot of overlaps. But at least it's not as bad as what happened on Wednesday, where, again, that was a day where I had to keep an eye on 11 games, and at one point I had to keep track of 7 games that was playing around the same time. But with that being said, let us actually get into the first game, which is the Houston Dynamo against SKC. This game kicks off at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific on Saturday. Houston currently have a 2-4-2 record, but they have been looking red hot in these last 2 games and looking like one of the more scary team in terms of these last 2 games against an SKC team that currently have a 5-2-2 record. And although Sporting KC is still currently at the top of the Western Conference, these last couple of games they have definitely don't look like a team that should be belong in the top of the Western Conference and haven't played like a team that is a team at the top of the Western Conference. Now, Houston, as I mentioned, the reason why they have looked very scary in these last 2 games is that they have outscored their opponent 8-2 in the last 2 games, and that includes a 5-2 demolition that they put against Sporting KC last week on the road, while Sporting KC is now winless in 3 games. Now, the key point in this game is that can this red-hot attack of Houston is going to continue? And the answer to that question is probably yes. I think this attack is going to continue to be red hot, and especially facing against an SKC defense that has looked vulnerable, and especially how Houston just completely tore them apart the last time they meet each other. Yeah, I have a feeling it could be the same thing happening this time. Although instead of focusing on the defensive aspect of Peter Vermeer's team, what I'm going to put in terms of the key point for SKC is actually the attack, because while a lot of people focus on this SKC team and say that they're really struggling right now because their defense is absolutely hot garbage, let's not forget about the attack too, because the attack has kind of sputtered a little bit, and in these last couple of games they've only scored like 1 or 2 goals in a game, and that guys like Alan Pulido, who was red hot during the MLS's back tournament, he hasn't scored a single goal so far ever since SKC is back in the restart and have done with the MLS's back tournament. And Johnny Russell only have scored 1 goal for this team. So it's not like this SKC attack has been lighting up ever since they're back from the regular season and they finished the MLS's back tournament. So that is, I think, something that people kind of easily overlook, the fact that the reason why SKC isn't playing well is because the defense, but let's also not forget about the attack that is kind of sputter a little bit in these last couple of games. But with that being said, in terms of my prediction, yeah, I'm going to go with Houston. I mean, I would not bet against Tad Ramos' team with the way how red hot they have looked in these last 2 games, and especially since this game is going to be in Houston, and knowing the fact that the Dynamo always tends to have a good home record for the past couple of seasons, I would definitely not bet against the Dynamo, potentially get another 3 points in this game against a Sporting KC team that, again, it does look like this team has struggled ever since they got out of the MLS's back tournament and only getting 1 win in the 4 games that they have played ever since the regular season started. But moving on, in terms of the next match, is going to be Orlando City versus Atlanta United. So Orlando, their record is now 4-3-2, while Atlanta currently have a 3-1-4 record. This game kicks off at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific time. Orlando did drew 1-1 against Nashville away, although, that was kind of a trap game for Orlando, because I'm pretty sure they were really looking forward to this one since they were able to beat them last week 3-1 at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. While Atlanta, they drew 0-0 to one of the new boys of MLS, that is Inter Miami at home. And that is actually the first time that Atlanta actually drew 0-0 in almost 2.5 years. And you have to go back to 2017 when they, of course, drew 0-0 to Columbus in the the Eastern Conference first round playoff match, which they end up losing that one on penalty against the Columbus Crew. Now, in the last 5 head-to-head matchup between both of these teams, as I mentioned, Orlando finally getting a historic first win in this so-called Southern rivalry against Atlanta by beating them 3-1 on the road at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. But before that, it was all Atlanta, and this is prior to the era when Atlanta was still a dominant team, and they still have Joseph Martinez in this squad, which they unfortunately don't have for this season or for this game. But they, of course, won 1-0 against Orlando City on the road. Then won 1-0 at home against Orlando City. Won 2-1 on the road against Orlando City before putting a 4-0 smackdown of Orlando City in that game. But as I said, it feels like there is definitely a power shift that is going on between both of these teams, and that, Orlando, they have definitely looked like a very good team and one of the more dangerous team in the Eastern Conference, and all that is because of what Oscar Pereira has done to this team and make this team some of the most entertaining team to watch. While Atlanta, yeah, they are going through a transitional period, and you know how I mentioned how Pity Martinez is potentially on the doorstep of leaving this club and is going to be going to Saudi Arabia? Well, there is now another rumor saying that Ezequiel Barco could be following him suit, but instead of going to Saudi Arabia, it looked like he is going to finally get the move to go to Europe, and Sevilla is in contact with Atlanta to potentially get Barco. And if I'm Atlanta, I would decide to sell Barco if the right price is there, because I really think this is truly a end of the era in terms of the way that they have looked very dominant in the first couple of years, and now this is the first time ever in their franchise history where they're going to go through a true transitional period, where they're going to have a new coach and that they're going to have 2 DP slot open and probably have a bunch of money from the Pity Martinez and potentially the Ezequiel Barco transfer fee, and they need to find a way to kind of build a squad just as good as it was for the first couple of seasons they were in MLS. But until then, I think this is Orlando time to really start to kind of dominate this rivalry, at least for this season, because next year when Joseph Martinez does come back into this team, it's going to be interesting to see how this rivalry is going to look like. But as of now, I'm saying Orlando is going to win this one and get their second win against their hated rival Atlanta, but for the first time getting a home win against their hated rival Atlanta United. But moving on, in terms of the next match, is Vancouver versus Toronto. So Vancouver, it's been a while since we have talked about the Whitecaps because they haven't actually been playing in 10 days. And while they haven't been playing in 10 days, their record is now 2-0-6. And I guess Whitecaps fan is kind of happy the fact that it's been a while since the Whitecaps have been played, because it's been bad for the past couple of games. And ever since they had that miraculous run in the MLS's back tournament, they have lost 3 in a row and doesn't even look like a team that belong in the MLS. While Toronto, they were on verge of potentially breaking the record for the longest unbeaten run in the regular season, and then they lost to Montreal, and we don't need to talk about well, actually, for the sake of Toronto fans, we don't need to talk about that penalty again, of how awful and just unnecessary that penalty is, because I'm pretty sure they know that penalty, along with how bad they perform against Montreal at home, is the reason why they lost that game, and it puts an end to their 18-game unbeaten run and just one shy of potentially tying or actually they're tied with the record, but they were just one shy away of potentially breaking the record. Now, the key points in this game, as I mentioned, Vancouver haven't played in 10 days, but for Toronto, I feel like this could be a trap game. And the reason why I feel like this could be a trap game is because the very next match, which is going to be in the middle of the week, they're going to be flying all the way back across the other side of the country, and they're going to be playing against Montreal. And you know they want to have some revenge after what happened on the midweek match. And knowing the fact that since the Whitecaps by far has more rest than TFC has, like ever since TFC have played against Vancouver, Toronto had to play 2 more matches, and this is technically their 3rd game in 7 days. And as I said before many times in the preview, whenever you have to go to the other side of the country and you have to do it in a short rest, this is always going to be very difficult, and especially you're playing on the road. So I won't be surprised if Vancouver is going to pull this off. And I know if Vancouver does pull this off, a lot of people are going to say this is probably the biggest upset we have seen. I don't think so. I mean, judging by the fact that, I'm pretty sure Marc Dos Santos, during this 10 days, he has kind of have time to figure out how to get his team actually play like an MLS team and not look like a USL kind of level team for the past couple of days, or maybe even a CPL level kind of team ever since they got back from the MLS's back tournament. And knowing the fact that this is going to be a very tired Toronto team, I won't be surprised if this is going to be a resort for Vancouver, and hence that's why I'm going to predict Vancouver is going to win this. And you can call me crazy, but I think this could be an upset, judging by the circumstances, and that, again, a lot of people is going to say this is going to be a big surprise, but I don't think it is. And if it is going to be the case, I'm going to mention it in the review. I mean, I'm going to basically say, see, I told you how this looked like it was going to be an upset on the deck. But moving on, in terms of the next game, is the desperation game. And the reason why I say this is the desperation game is because both of these teams are sitting near the bottom of the Western Conference. And if you do not include the Vancouver Whitecaps, who's currently at the bottom of the Western Conference, these two teams are in the basement of the Western Conference right now and are desperate to trying to get a win. Both of these teams have an identical record with a 2-2-3 record, and I've got to put the time of the kickoff of this game, which is a 10:30 p.m. Eastern kickoff, but a 7:30 p.m. my time and a local time kickoff of this game. The Quakes, of course, they've been outscored 8-3 in the last 2 games, while Colorado is now winless in 5 games. And I think out of all the team in MLS that probably suffered the most in terms of this long break going all the way back to the MLS's back tournament, Colorado is clearly the team. I mean, they were flying high in the first 2 games before, this pandemic happened, and ever since the season, of course, restarted with the MLS's back tournament, and now the regular season is resumed, Robin Fraser's team has just not got it going at all, and looked like a similar team to what happened last year with Colorado, how they went 11 games without a win to start the season. But that being said, I feel like this is definitely a must-win for both of these teams, and I think if you wanted to say which team needs more in terms of this must-win situation, I think it's got to be the Quakes. And for the Quakes, I know Almeida, after the LAFC game, he basically was very angry about the result of that game, and he was embarrassed with the way that his team is played. And he also mentioned that changes is going to happen. Well, if there is going to be changes that is going to be happening, then I should expect to see it in this game against Colorado. Because if I'm going to see the same man-marking system that basically cost us a 3-2 loss against the Galaxy in the Cali Clasico and just get flat-out embarrassed by LAFC in that game, yeah, that's not really changed whatsoever. I mean, I just feel like it just gets to a point where either Almeida's got to admit that this man-marking system just does not work in MLS and he needs to change it up, or he's got to change up this man-marking system and just kind of tweak it in a way where it's not just total man-marking, just kind of one everywhere on the field, because it's been proven for the past couple of games, or even in just these 2 short seasons, that when you run a man-marking system like that, not only it requires a lot of energy from these players, but if there's going to be a mistake that one of these players makes, this could be very catastrophic in terms of the system. And let's also not mention that it is very easy to counterattack this team. Like, you basically, I mean, whenever the Quakes gets a set piece, it's technically a win for the opposition, because you know if the Quakes messed up a set piece, you can just go on the counter attack and you just have like one man to beat. And I saw there was so many times in the last game against LAFC where every time we have a set piece or a chance to basically score and lost the ball in a crucial spot, LAFC immediately gone on the counter attack, and most of the time I only saw like one guy left in the back to try to stop that, and that is just something that is clearly not what you want to do when you are playing in an MLS game. So yeah, if Almeida says that change is going to happen, I expect this to happen. Otherwise, I really am questioning about Almeida, and that, you know, I don't want to say Almeida out, and I don't want to create that because, you know, I still believe Almeida can do some good things, but it's getting to a point where I'm started to kind of lose a little belief on Almeida, and really in this front office of the way that, is this team really transform after they kind of promised that it was going to be for the past 2 years. But that being said, I still have to make a prediction, and I'm just going to go with the Quakes to win this one. I really hope the Quakes does win this one because, again, if you look at the next two games, we got the Galaxy and the Portland Timbers after these next two games, and they are definitely not very easy opponent that we have to face in these next two games. But moving on, in terms of the next match, is DC United versus NYCFC. So DC United, last game, they got a very lucky 1-0 away win to the Redbulls. Well, NYCFC has been red hot, and that they are become one of the team that I think is kind of flying a little bit under the radar in terms of how red hot that they have been. But they have won 3 in a row coming into this game, and they improved their record to 4-0-5, and this game is going to be kicking off at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. And by the way, this is the first of 8 games that's going to be happening during the weekend's action. Key points in this game for DC United, again, was the last win just pure luck with the way that they were able to get a last-minute winner, but also it's kind of maybe due to the fact that the Redbulls not only switched off, but their goalkeeper probably should have saved that shot. Or is this finally things start to turn around for Ben Olsen kind of team? I know after Chris Armas today being dismissed by the Redbulls, there's a lot of DC fans that is kind of a little bit triggered right now. The fact that their front office is not decided to fire Ben Olsen after all these years that they demand Olsen to be out of this team as their head coach. Now, for NYCFC, this is really a great chance for them to go on a run in these next couple of games, and that I mentioned how after this game against DC United, they get a home game against FC Cincinnati, and while Cincinnati has looked relatively decent with them getting a bunch of 0-0 draw, it is definitely a team that is beatable for NYCFC. And judging by the fact that Maxi Morales is back in this team for NYCFC, I expect this team to be able to win this game, and by the end of phase 1, I think they would be right there on the point where they have won 5 in a row and are back to where I feel like this team clearly should belong, which is near the top of the Eastern Conference. So with that being said, I'm going to say NYCFC is going to win because I still don't believe that last game against the Redbulls that DC United won was just a turning point, and that if they can win this game, maybe this might be a turning point to this team, but I just don't know. I just think NYCFC is going to walk out a victory in this game, and that last game, again, that DC won against the Redbulls seems like a pure luck with the way that they did. Speaking of the Redbulls, moving on in terms of the next game, is none other than the Redbulls taking on the Union. And speaking of Chris Armas, as I mentioned earlier, he of course had been fired by the Redbulls and become the first head coach to be fired this season. I even made a video about that, so make sure you guys go and check that one out. But coming into this game, they are going to be playing against the Union, where their record is 3-2-4 and 4-3-2. And despite the fact that even though Armas is no longer going to be coaching this team, the Redbulls are technically not like a historically bad team that it makes sense why that they eventually fired their head coach, as they're currently in 7th in the Eastern Conference. But knowing what's has gone on with the Redbulls, and after that embarrassing loss to DC United at home by losing 1-0, I feel like the Redbulls front office knew that Arma's time was kind of up, and knowing the fact that the fans were really pressuring the front office to fire Armas, it was inevitable that eventually the Redbulls front office had to make the move, and that, as I said, today they finally fired Chris Armas as their head coach. While the Union, of course, they lost 1-0 in that tough and gritty match against the Columbus Crew away. And the key points in this game is that we still don't know who exactly is going to be the interim head coach for the Redbulls. CJ Brown, the Redbulls assistant, also is no longer the assistant for this team, as he, along with Armas, is now leaving this team, and that the Redbulls simply just said that we will announce who is going to be the interim head coach in these next couple of days, and probably maybe by the time I finish recording this video, they probably have already announced who's the interim head coach. But as the time of this recording, they still haven't announced who is going to be the interim head coach, and that we shall see whether or not this interim head coach that they have is gonna do well in this first game. And I'm expecting they're probably going to do well in this first game, because usually when we see interim head coach coming in and right after when a head coach has been fired, the team tends to be more up for it in the next game, because they want to prove their interim head coach that they deserve that starting spot. And I expect the Red Bulls should look much better in this game compared to the last one against DC United. That being said, they are facing a Union team that are definitely looking to bounce back after that tough loss away against Columbus. But again, I think this could be a draw between both of these teams, and that this could be one of those low-scoring game again, because both of these teams don't usually score a lot of goals, and that this could be a gritty kind of 0-0 or 1-1 kind of resort that I expect both of these teams to have at the end of the day. And I think if this game does end in a draw, if you're the Union, I think they'll be satisfied knowing the fact that they're playing against a Red Bulls team that I think once they are under an interim head coach now, they would look much better than they have been under Chris Armas for the past couple of games. But that being said, I am now going to switch the boards and look at the last 6 games, including some of those big rivalry match that is going to be happening for the remaining of the Sunday games. But yeah, moving on, in terms of the next match, is the Chicago Fire against New England Revolution, as Chicago is coming into this game with a 2-2-5 record, while New England has a 2-5-2 record. And this game kicks off at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific on Sunday. Chicago, of course, drew 0-0 to FC Cincinnati, while New England lost 2-0 to NYCFC at home. Now, the key points in this game is that I feel like this is a winnable game for both teams. And I think both teams will definitely have this mindset, knowing the fact that their opponent is definitely beatable and that they can definitely get 3 points out of this game. However, this does make it get a little bit tougher to try to predict who is going to get the win. And the other thing that makes it tough to predict who's going to win is that both of these teams are very inconsistent. Chicago, I don't really need to get to my spiel about how they are a team that has been once again looked like a very inconsistent team. Well, for New England, they're inconsistent in a way where when they are actually on, they can actually get victory, but when they are not on, then sometimes they, of course, let 3 points slip out of the hands, and those resort turns to a draw, or as the case in the last game where they just didn't do enough going forward on the attack, and that is one of the big reasons why they weren't able to get a win and actually lost 2-0 to NYCFC in this one. So, because of the fact that this is so unpredictable, and that whenever I have to predict a game that is unpredictable, you know what I'm going to go with. I'm going to say it's going to be a draw between both of these teams, because, at least I can't get it wrong if this game does end in a draw. Well, I will still get it wrong if one of these teams does win, but I'm just going to say a draw is going to be a safe bet in terms of seeing who exactly is going to win in this game. And if one of these teams is able to win this game, then definitely good on them in terms of getting all 3 points. But moving on, in terms of the next match, is the Hell is Real Derby. Now, I know you probably are are thinking, why is this game not on FS1? And are you going to once again talk about how this game should be on national television instead of this one between Miami and Nashville that is going to be on FS1? I'm not going to make that claim again because, after last time how I said that this Hell is Real Derby should have been on FS1 and the New England versus Redbulls game shouldn't. Yeah, this game that I thought it should have been on national television would be an absolute bore fest, and I'm pretty sure the rating is going to be very bad if neutral is able to watch a 0-0 bore fest between both of these teams compared to that game between the Red Bulls versus New England, where even though that game ended 1-1 and there were at times kind of some boring stretch, at least that game there was goals, and also there was really a sense that both of these teams could potentially, or either of those teams were able to get all 3 points. Now, as I said, this game is going to be once again on local television. It's going to be kicking off at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific. Last 4 head-to-head matchup between both of these teams, as I mentioned, both of these teams played to a very boring 0-0 draw. But before that, in the MLS's back tournament, Columbus was able to win 4-0 against FC Cincinnati. Then it was a 3-1 win against FC Cincinnati for the Crew before it was a 2-2 draw between both of these teams in the Hell is Real Derby, as this is going to be the 5th time that both of these teams is going to meet each other. And I'm going to say Columbus is going to win this one, and unfortunately Cincinnati wait of potentially getting their first Hell is Real Derby win is going to have to wait because, while FC Cincinnati has looked good in terms of defending this season, especially at home, knowing the fact that they have I think they haven't really give up a lot of goals and haven't give up a goal ever since the regular season resume when they're playing at home. However, when they're on the road, that's when it is a bit of a different story, and that, Columbus, I know they have kind of struggled a little bit in terms of goal scoring, but, hopefully now that they, of course, are able to get that big win against the Union to kind of give them a little bit of a confident boost coming into this one, and knowing the fact that the guys that they of course missed during for the past couple of weeks and near the end of the MLS's back tournament should be back to full strength. Those guys I'm talking about is like Eloy Room, Lucas Zalarian, and also Jonas Mokhtar. This game should be a little bit, well, not only this game should be a little bit more exciting, but Columbus, I think, should be a team that should have just enough quality to able to win against an FC Cincinnati team that just doesn't have what it takes in terms of going for on the attack and just doesn't have anybody can potentially contribute in terms of the goal scoring department for this team. But moving on, in terms of the next match, is the Loons against RSL. So Minnesota coming into this game with a 3-2-3 record, while RSL currently coming into this game with a 2-5-1 record. This game kicks off at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific time, and yeah, Minnesota has been in a very bad run ever since the MLS's back tournament, and I think out of all the team that has looked terrible ever since the MLS's back tournament has concluded, I think Minnesota, alongside with the San Jose Earthquakes and maybe even the Portland Timbers, are probably the worst in terms of coming out of this tournament, and that they look nothing like the team that was in the MLS's back tournament, and also when they won their first 2 games of the season back in March. While RSL, they're definitely full of confidence after drawing a 2-2 draw against Seattle at home. But the question I have with RSL is, as much as they are showing some resilience in terms of getting resort and able to respond after being down so many times in the past 2 games, and also dealing with the you-know-what situation right now behind doors for RSL, the question is, can those resiliency finally turn into 3 points? Because as much as it's great to see this team to show the resilience to come back in these resort, how about try not to find yourself go down 1-0 early in this game and have to fight and have that resiliency to get 3 points in this. And for Minnesota, I mean, I think this is probably the least confident home game that I think the Loons are coming into this ever since probably back in 2018 or even back in 2017 when we were just really struggling. And that if you want to count count home games in Allianz Field, this is probably the lowest confidence that I have coming into this home game at Allianz Field against RSL, because this team just doesn't have any confidence whatsoever, especially on the attacking end. But as I said last week, I was kind of surprised that Reynoso, of course, made his debut, and that I'm hoping he will get the start in this game now that we kind of get a little bit of a sneak peek of how good he was in that Dynamo game, and that if he does get the start in this game and get the time to show off what he can, of course, do, I hope that will be a way to get this attack out of the funk, because it has been a real struggle in terms of this Minnesota attack, and that they have not scored a lot of goals, and that they look like the same team that in the latter part of the season where we had the same issue, where this team just cannot score goals and was just heavily reliant on the defense. And the only difference is this year, the defense is definitely not as good as last year, and that unfortunately still no announcement of what's going to happen with Iko Para and whether or not if he's going to be back in this team. But with that being said, I'm going to say it's going to be a draw in this game. And I don't know if a draw for Minnesota is technically a good thing, because that means we're now 4 games without a win, and that a draw might have kind of stopped the bleeding in terms of losing 3 in a row, but it doesn't really give you a lot of confidence in the fact that you can get back to winning ways. Well, for RSL, they have kind of becoming a draw king of MLS for the last couple of time, and that the only way I think if they can stop drawing games is that they got to make sure they don't shoot themselves in the foot early in this game and have to try to come back multiple times like they've been doing in the last 2 games. But moving on, in terms of the next match, is a national televised game between Inter Miami and Nashville FC that's going to be kicking off at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific time. By the way, I accidentally forget to put the time of these last 3 games, but I'll just mention it during the preview of these games. But this one is a rematch of the so-called expansion derby from last week, where Nashville was able to win 1-0 against Miami, and that they have now improved their record to around 2-1-4, but now it's 2-2-4 since they got that draw against Orlando City. Well, Miami, yeah, their record is now 1-1-6, and it's definitely not a pretty good record, but at least they got a draw in the last game against Atlanta, and that was the first time ever where they actually got a point in a game in their short MLS existence. Now, the key points in this game is that despite how bad Miami has been in these first 7 games of their debut season, they technically are unbeaten at home and have not lost 1 game at home, as they were able to win 3-2 against Orlando City to get their first win. So maybe they can have that kind of mindset, and knowing that, we're unbeaten at home, we're going to try to make our stadium in Fort Lauderdale a fortress, and looking to try to maybe get revenge on Nashville after what happened last week. Now, Nashville, they have definitely looked much better in these last couple of games, as they have actually got points in 4 of the last 6 games that they play, and I believe they have got 8 points in the last 6 games that they have played, and that's definitely not bad. I mean, 8 points in the last 6 games, and knowing we have an expanded playoffs, especially in the Eastern Conference, that will be enough of a point total, I think, that they could potentially find themselves in the last couple of spots in the playoffs of the Eastern Conference. But obviously the big question coming into this game is that what is going to be the goal scoring. Goals that is going to be scored for both of these teams, and how many goals are we going to see in this game, because I know both of these teams are struggling in terms of scoring goals, and in the last game between both of these teams, you clearly saw how both teams really just had no idea whenever they get to the final third to what they exactly wanted to do. So I expect this could be another one of those low scoring kind of game, but I'm going to give Inter Miami the edge in this one, because I think they definitely want some revenge after last week game, and that I think they should just have enough goal scoring piece to be able to beat Nashville. And especially I heard there's news that Matt Tweedy, he is going to be available with this team in of training, I believe, on Saturday. I'm not quite sure if he's going to be ready enough to play in this game, and if he is, I think he most likely is going to come off the bench, and that could be a decent kind of addition to put Matt Tweedy there along with Inter Miami, and that now I also have heard that most likely the Gonzalo Higuain signing is going to be coming close to fruition, and that unfortunately, as much as I wish Miami would have been a little bit more ambitious and should have maybe gone with Suarez instead of Higuain, I've also heard today that Suarez have officially gone to Juventus, so yeah, most likely Higuain is going to be coming to Inter Miami, and that they're not going to get Suarez. But moving on, in terms of the last two games, which are the biggest rivalry game, if you want to look at who exactly is the biggest rivalry out of these last two games, well, the media usually say it's El Trafico. But for me, I always will say the Cascadia Derby is the best rivalry in MLS. And I do have a bit of an issue with these two games, and the fact that I don't understand why exactly this game is kicking off at 7 p.m. local time, and the next one is kicking off at 7:30 p.m. Pacific time, and basically there's going to be time where both of these games is going to be simultaneously playing and each other. And especially this is one of the first few Cascadia Derby that is not going to be on national televised. Well, this one is going to be on Twitter, which I am not going to be going to Twitter to watch this game, and I'll probably just use a knockoff stream to watch this one, knowing the commentator in Twitter is just super annoying. I just don't understand what kind of scheduling is that. I mean, if you're going to promote these to be the two best rivalry in MLS, then at least don't put them right around the same time, and at least put one of them actually on national television. And especially since this game between Miami and Nashville is going to finish around 7 o'clock, why not do it? FS1 do like a doubleheader and maybe use this game as the second doubleheader, or the other game being as the second doubleheader. But anyway, that's just me kind of being a little bit annoyed with how both of these games are kind of going to be at one point playing simultaneously. But talk about the Cascadia Derby between the Seattle Sounders and the Portland Timbers. Seattle is coming into this Cascadia Derby with a 4-3-1 record, while the Portland Timbers coming into this Cascadia Derby with a 3-2-3 record. Last time both of these teams met, it was a 3-0 away win for Portland. In fact, the road team has now won the last 5 Cascadia Derby in the regular season. And in terms of the head-to-head matchup, the last 5 of them, not including the U.S. Open Cup and also the playoffs, it was a 3-0 win for Seattle over Portland on the road, before it was the Sounders with another 2-1 away win in the Cascadia Derby against the Timbers. But then Portland returned the favorite and give Seattle a 2-1 loss in the Cascadia Derby, while Seattle would win 1-0 against Portland away, before Portland would be able to win 3-2 against the Seattle Sounders in the Cascadia Derby. And it's definitely really back and forth with the way that this derby has win, which is kind of one of the bigger reasons why I'm actually going to go with, I'm not quite sure would you say this is an upset, because I know clearly the Sounders are going to be favorite in this game, knowing the fact that they have looked very decent ever since the MLS's back tournament is concluded, and that the Timbers have looked very poor ever since they won the tournament. And that, I decided to go kind of a little bit through the spread and kind of decided to go with the Timbers in this one. But besides the fact that, history shows that the road team tends to be king in this derby, I just feel like this could be the game that Portland really desperately needed in terms of a game that can turn around their fortune. Because I know in the last couple of games, their fortune has definitely not been great. That game against RSL where they won 4-2, they of course conceded 2 late goals. And then of course last game, they unfortunately got kind of a little bit ref ball in that one against the Galaxy by having a goal in the 81st minute from Jeremy Obovisi being disallowed, and hence if that goal would have counted, it would have been maybe a 3-3 game between both of these teams. But yeah, I think this could be a game that if the Timbers and Savarese team is going to turn around, this would be the perfect game to do it. And I have a feeling they're going to go with their old strategy again, where they're just going to sit back and let the Sounders kind of control the game and try to hit them on the counter attack and see if they can, of course, score some goals. And in fact, goal scoring is not an issue for the Portland Timbers. I mean, they've been very good in terms of the goal scoring department despite the struggle. The only problem is their defense hasn't been that, and that their defense got to be much better in this game with the way that they have conceded 10 goals in the last 3 games. And if they can, of course, do exactly that, I really think they can definitely can get all 3 points against the Sounders and can really turn around their fortune in the regular season. This is kind of a derby game. If you get a win in this game, your fortune in terms of the regular season can quickly turn. And if you have a bad run, either if you're a Seattle Sounders team or a Portland Timbers team, history shows that the winner of this game quickly have their fortune turn in terms of the bad runs that they had if they are able to win this game. But now, moving on to the last game of this weekend, also known as the so-called biggest rivalry in MLS according to the MLS media. And that, of course, is the Galaxy versus LAFC. Galaxy currently have a record of 3-2-3, but they have now won 3 in a row ever since they were winless coming out of the MLS's back tournament. While LAFC, they have a record of 3-3-2, and if you ignore that 5-1 beatdown that they handed to the Quakes, yeah, they have not looked good ever since they have got back from the MLS's back tournament and returned to the regular season. In fact, the first game between both of these teams that of course is back in the regular season, it was the Galaxy that were able to win 2-0 against LAFC. And at that during that moment, we were shocked. The fact that the Galaxy, with how much they have looked in this season and how it looked like this was maybe a transitional year this season, got a shock 2-0 win against an LAFC team that everybody thought that they were going to be dangerous again with Carlos Vela back in this lineup. But how the table has turned ever since that meeting, and it's now the LAFC the one that is kind of asking the question about how, despite the 5-1 win that they got against the Quakes, this is a team that have not done well whenever they play in a big game like that. And with the Galaxy, with all sorts of confidence that they have in the last 3 games by winning all 3 of them. And these 3 games that they play aren't easy games. I mean, as I mentioned, they beat LAFC. They were able to win against the Quakes, who historically for the past couple of California Classico, the Quakes have got better of the Galaxy. And then the last game against the Timbers, going on the road to be able to beat them in that one. Yeah, this is a team that is definitely no joke, and that, I'm going to say the Galaxy is going to win this game because I think their form is going to be much better, and especially how they're going to maybe try to do the same thing they did in the last game, or maybe even try to be a little bit more aggressive in this one too, because knowing that their attacker right now is just full of confidence whatsoever, and knowing that LAFC backline is so vulnerable right now, even though they of course had that 5-1 beatdown against the Quakes, I can really see the Galaxy potentially getting another win against an LAFC team that there is still a lot of question of what has gone wrong in this team, and whether if they can, of course, recover in a way so that they can find themselves back near the top of the Western Conference. But there you have it. That is pretty much it for my preview of all 12 of these games. As always, let me know in the comments below what do you think of all 12 of these games. And also, let me know in the comments below your prediction for all 12 of these games. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like. Smash that subscribe button. For the review, I am going to look at the first 4 games on Saturday as part number 1 of the review, and part number 2 will basically be the Sunday game, because since there's 4 games on Saturday and there's going to be 8 on Sunday, I think that's right around the number where I can actually do a review without kind of have to split the first 6 games like I've done in the last 2 weeks, and it kind of creates a little bit of an awkward situation where when I do part number 1 of the review, I literally just watch games that is going to be part of part number 2, and that I can't really talk about those games because I have to wait either the very next morning or the very next day to basically talk about it as part of part 2 of the review. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.